Seamus Healy.
Last Ceann Comhairle, I welcome the opportunity to speak on the budget 2019, and I want to say that I believe that today's budget is shamefully inadequate, given the extreme crisis in housing and health and the need to fully restore cuts in welfare, disability provision, public service pay and pensions and other areas. Some might say that today's budget is a missed opportunity, but not so. It is rather a conscious decision, a conscious and deliberate policy by Fine Gael, the Independent Alliance and Fianna Fáil to protect the massive increase in wealth of the Irish super rich from fair taxation and to make further tax concessions to them. Prudent budgeting does not require limiting of spending to the shamefully inadequate figures in today's budget. The European Union's fiscal treaty does not require it either, and it does not forbid extra revenue raising, provided it's recurrent. Significant additional income could have been raised if the government was prepared to make the super-rich pay their fair share in taxation. The Minister told us numerous times today that his income tax and USC measures are to ease the burden on those on low and middle incomes. Well, last Ceann Comhairle, nothing could be further from the truth. This is a budget for the super-rich. So what happened in this budget? For those on incomes of less than €30,000 per year, the CSO tells us that's 1.18 million workers. 1 million of those are PAYE workers, 180,000 are self-employed, and the total is 40% of the workforce. There is absolutely no income tax gain for the 1 million PAYE workers in this category. Not a single cent. For the 180,000 self-employed, the income tax gain is the princely sum of €40 per year, less than €1 per week. And of course, the EU tells us that inflation next year will be 1.3%, which will wipe out that huge figure of €40 per year. And in relation to social welfare, we have an increase of €5. Social welfare recipients must wait till next March to get it. It doesn't go anywhere near restoring the pre-cut levels of payment. And for the third year in a row, there is no child benefit increase. But contrast that to what has happened to people of wealth, people who are rich and powerful in our society. The CSO tells us that 53,000 individuals have incomes ranging from €150,000 to €2 million per annum. And they get the full tax and USC benefits from this budget, totalling €13.1 million. So there is a golden circle of rich and powerful individuals in this society who have not been touched by this budget. There is no wealth tax on their assets, and they have huge assets. The top 10% of these wealthiest individuals have assets which are €40 billion above peak boom levels, and they're not going to pay a single cent on that. The overall financial assets are now €77 billion above peak boom levels. Not a single cent of taxation on that either. The 300 wealthiest individuals who have €100 billion neither will they pay a single cent on those assets. And only last week, the Controller and Auditor General reported on how these particular individuals avoided tax avoidance by the super rich, he said. And that included the fact that 83 of these high net worth individuals with in excess of €50 million of assets declared, would you believe, taxable income of less than the average industrial wage, of less than €36,500. Shameful. And if we go on to the banks, we find that the Bank of Ireland, AIB and the permanent TSB had profits last year of €2.5 billion. They didn't pay a single euro tax on that, and they won't pay a single euro this year or for the next 20 years, because the last government and this government have exempted them from such tax. These are the banks that the public, the taxpayer, bailed out. These are the banks that brought the huge and savage austerity onto the backs of families all over this country. These are the banks who continue to evict families from their family homes, and they won't pay a single cent tax. If we go on to landlords, this budget continues the bonanza for landlords. And the provision in this budget whereby landlords will qualify for 100% mortgage interest relief to purchase, improve and repair property will be hugely damaging to the housing market. It will allow landlords to outbid young people in the purchase of houses. And of course, it will drive up prices even further. This provision, Minister, should be withdrawn immediately. Also, this budget provides an additional €121 million for landlords under the guise of the Housing Assistance Payment Scheme. And this year, in 2018, there is already a provision for €1.1 billion for this scheme for landlords. This is hugely damaging to housing, hugely damaging to families, and is a situation whereby the government is again putting its trust on private developers, private landlords to solve the housing crisis, something that they have never done, something they will never do, and it is time that the government changed the policy in relation to housing. We must build public housing on public land and build them in huge numbers. This budget widens the divide between rich and poor. And Ireland is a very rich country, a very wealthy country. On GDP per head of population, Ireland is wealthier than Germany, than the United Kingdom, the United States, than France and Italy. Overall, Ireland is ranked 8th in the world in wealth. The top 10,000 of personal income recipients have incomes totalling €6 billion per year. That's an average of €600,000 per person. And they have received a full benefit of the income tax and USC reductions in the last 3 budgets and in today's budget. The top 5% of all income earners, on average incomes of €180,000, have received income tax and USC reductions in the last 2 budgets totalling €172 million. Today, they again will benefit to the full from the income tax and USC charges. And today again, very wealthy, fabulously wealthy people actually, will escape any additional imposition on their massive and growing wealth. Last Corla, the St Vincent de Paul Society budget submission some months ago sketched the background to this budget, and their document calling itself "Paving a Pathway Out of Poverty" and the pervasive impact of poverty, basically told us what the situation is for ordinary people in this country. 780,000 people are living below the poverty line. 70,000 children are growing up in poverty. 10,000 are homeless, including almost 4,000 children. 100,000 families on local authority housing waiting lists. 102,000 working poor. 48% went without heating due to cost. 520,000 adults have very poor literary skills. And the society last year had 130,000 calls for assistance and supported families to the tune of €27 million. Today's budget, Las Count Corla, will do nothing for these families, will do nothing for the people that the St Vincent de Paul Society helped last year and have been helping for years. And really, you know, if the issues raised by the St Vincent de Paul Society are to be tackled, then rich and powerful people in this society will have to be made pay their fair share. And if national and local issues are to be tackled successfully, if public services are to be provided and improved, and additional public services provided, then very wealthy people in this society and a country that's the 8th richest in the world must be made pay their fair share. And in Tipperary, in my constituency, we have such issues that need to be dealt with. And I'll just instance one or two of them, Las Count Corla. There is an absolutely urgent need for acute inpatient mental health beds in Tipperary. And those beds need to be put in place to replace the beds that were lost when a former Minister Kathleen Lynch, unfairly, unjustly and in my view outrageously closed St Michael's Unit in Clonmel. And monies, Minister, from this budget must be ring-fenced to ensure that beds are opened to replace those beds that were wrongly closed. And money must be ring-fenced from this budget to properly resource, to properly staff and to properly fund community mental health teams in Tipperary and the CAMS teams in Tipperary, because the mental health services in Tipperary are substandard, acute beds are non-existent, and those issues need to be tackled and need to be tackled urgently, and it's certainly something I have raised on numerous occasions and I will be returning to again in the very near future. Also, Las Count Corla, communities in rural towns right across this country, and those towns in Tipperary, County Tipperary, like Tipperary Town, like Carrick-on-Shore, like Thurles, like Nina, like Rossgray, those towns feel and indeed have been abandoned by this government and by previous governments. And they now need support from government so they can develop economically and socially, they can create jobs, they can boost the retail trade, build public housing and support community facilities. And it's my view, Las Count Corla, that the 2040 plan is not fit for purpose when it comes to rural Ireland and rural towns, rural market towns in particular. And that plan, in my view, must be revisited and revisited urgently and ensure that towns like those I've mentioned are targeted for development and for job creation. I've already referred to the health situation in Tipperary, and I want to refer also to the question of the assessment of needs for children with disabilities. There is a situation right across the country now, and I know, and I've raised it on numerous occasions as well here, where the assessment of needs for children, which is supposed to take place and be completed under the Disability Act within 6 months of a referral. The HSE are breaking the law in relation to this, right, left and centre, right across this country and in Tipperary. And I can tell you, Last County Cora, that I have numerous families who have been on to me where they've been told in writing by the HSE in Tipperary that their child will not be seen for 2 years. This is in a situation where children, young children, need to be assessed quickly and at an early age if they're to benefit from the services that need to be provided for them and that should be provided for them as early and as young as possible. There's also a white elephant in Tipperary, in Cashel, in what was formerly Our Lady's Hospital. And that hospital was upgraded, and some £14 million upgraded by contract at a cost of some €14 million, fully fitted out as a hospital, but vacant and closed the ward areas for years now. That area, that hospital and that refurbished area was to be opened up as a hospital, a 65-bed hospital, to provide step-down facilities, palliative care facilities and district hospital facilities. And it's a shame that it is still vacant, and it should be opened to provide a backup to the other hospitals in the area, South Tipperary General Hospital and University Hospital Limerick. In relation to roads, Last County Corla, obviously I welcome the additional income of, I think it's 40 million for the upkeep of local and regional roads. Regional roads and local roads in particular are absolutely atrocious right across the country, and certainly in Tipperary as well. The figure which the Tipperary County Council management have indicated would be needed to upgrade the roads to a reasonable standard in the county is €196 million. Obviously, €40 million nationally won't go very far in relation to that. And I want to raise again the whole question of the upgrading of the N24 to motorway status. And that is the lifeblood of social and economic activity right from Limerick down to Wexford. And it would include a bypass of Tipperary town, of Clonmel and of Carrick-on-Suir. And that needs to be done and done as soon as possible. In relation to education, obviously the increase in capitation is welcome. It's not huge, but it is welcome. There would appear to be some monies made available for leadership in relation to working principals, and I hope there's enough money in that to ensure that principals are properly able to carry out their functions on an ongoing basis and have the time and space to do that. There appears to be no change in class sizes. Nor does there appear to be any provisions in relation to the official panels, which is something that is very badly needed. Last County Corla, I'll finish in relation to housing, and it's something that I've spoken on consistently here over quite a number of years now, and again I have to say, like other speakers earlier, that the provisions to this budget in relation to housing are absolutely disappointing is a very mild word, but the fact of the matter is that there is an emergency out there in housing. And it's time this government acknowledged that emergency. It's time this government implemented the private member's business motion, which was passed here last week, requesting the declaration of a statutory emergency by the Oireachtas. Because unless and until that's done, the housing situation is going to get worse. On a daily basis now, I have families who are either homeless or have got notices to quit, or are couch surfing with relatives and friends. And the situation has got worse over the last 12 months, and certainly the provisions in this budget will make no effective difference to the situation. We need the emergency to be declared. We need to ensure that evictions stop, that families are allowed to retain their tenancies in sale situations, so as they're not forced into homelessness from private rented accommodation. We really do need a huge emergency house building programme of public housing on public lands, and we need to do that and do it quickly. The final thing I'll say, last Count Corla, is that I would ask the government again to look at the whole question of the proposal by Irish Water to bring water from the Shannon to Dublin. This is a hugely wasteful proposal. It will be a huge waste of public money if it goes ahead. The pipes in Dublin are leaking to the tune of over 50%. It is a situation that is seen nowhere in the Western world. In most European countries and European cities, the maximum leakage is in the region of 10%. The highest figure that we know of is in London, which is at 25%. And recently, of course, apart from the Fight the Pipe organisation in Tipperary and Miss Kennedy, who has done an analysis of this situation, a professor at Dublin City University has said that going ahead with this project is like throwing money out of an open window. As I said, this is hugely wasteful. It's completely unnecessary, and what needs to be done is the pipes in Dublin need to be replaced, because otherwise you'll be sending water from the Shannon into the ground in Dublin, leaking at over 50%. I'll finish with that, last Count Corla, and certainly I'm not at all happy that this budget deals in any way with the real world that's out there. I think this government, the Independent Alliance and indeed Fianna Fáil have lost all contact with ordinary people, and I think this budget book of estimates proves that. Thank you.